lined up for this morning, which is great, and then we have two instructional games lined up for tonight. But no theory this morning, just all viewer games, which is great. I'm just gonna pull these up really quick, and yeah, we'll be ready to go. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically, these openings are interesting. I was just looking at the first one on our list. This is the game from Julio. I'll load it right now. Um, and yeah, this is interesting. Bishop's opening against knight f6. I don't know this theory like incredibly well, but I play the Italian game and usually play knight f3, one knight f3, but bishop c4 is also very playable. Transposes usually the same. My response to bishop c4 as black is bishop to c5, but here I think yeah, knight f3 is probably the play. Or against knight f6, I think you have to play d3 or knight f3. I think knight f3 hanging the e4 pawn is sort of tricky. You'll probably get it back, but it is a gambit opening. I don't know if there's anything. Basically this is a Petrov's defense with bishop to c4 played. But anyways, against yeah, I mean against this opening I would play 1d3. Is probably the main idea. Anyways, d3. Knight c6, knight f3, bishop c5, and here basically white's in a pretty solid position. He can play moves like bishop to g5. Black will probably castle. He can follow up with knight c3, knight d5, but overall white will be in a pretty good place. Anyways, continuing on from this, let's just go into the game. Black declines to take on e4. Hey, good morning, Aphelion. How are you? Welcome. So yeah, so basically this is a gambit. I mean, this would transpose out of knight f3, knight f6, and in the Petrovs, and then bishop to c4. I'm good. Yeah, good. Thanks for asking. But yeah, so here you have knight takes, bishop takes, queen e7, and here basically white's, I don't know, in a pretty solid position. He can line up the rook potentially on the e file. Trading the e pawn for the f pawn is generally good for white. It lessens black's king safety. Basically, opening the king file gives more open lines towards the black king. And f file, the f7 pawn is the weakest pawn. So these generally tend to be somewhat sharp positions for black. But let's go through it. So I guess in general, this is not an opening that I would play. I think, you can gambit the e4 pawn sometimes in the Petrovs, but I think that you probably should just steer towards something more solid. From just a fundamental perspective, playing a gambit opening is, hey, no problem at all, Electric. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. But yeah, when you play a gambit opening, it ends up being problematic for, it ends up basically being problematic for you in the sense that you give up material early and end up with, having to sort of prove the value of the gambit. Gambits are fun. They lead to very aggressive tactical positions. There's a lot of reasons to play them. You get practical compensation among other things. But in general, it's just not the kind of style that I'm the most familiar with. In my position or my situation, my idea was just always to play solid, take it to a middle game, and come up with better positions in the middle game. Basically get your opponent to play chess and then beat them at chess. So gambits for in general, other than the Queen's Gambit, which I consider to not really be a real gambit. Are not a particularly strong point of knowledge for me, and not necessarily something that I would recommend. Yeah, as black, the objective best move is knight takes e4. We can go through that line. Knight takes e4, knight c3, knight c6. This turns into some weird Halloween gambit type thing. But anyways. This objectively, it's Frankenstein Dracula, I think it's called, right? I remembered that Eric Schiller had a famous, and I think people were not a huge fan of it, but had a famous write-up on Frankenstein Dracula variation. Um, yeah, in my mind, d3 just gives such a solid position here. D3 or knight c3, very standard developing moves, and you're basically in a pretty good place with this. Um, I decline the Frankenstein Dracula variation. So knight f3, d6, knight g4. This gets into a pretty aggressive position. Trading off the knight for the bishop on e6, I think, is not the best idea for black. But here, I guess I just sort of sidestepped this general idea. Frankenstein Dracula, I know, has a lot of kind of crazy theory in it, very attacking opening, a lot of interesting things happen. But it's just not, it's something you can easily sidestep and turn into a much less, pre-prepared tactical game. So I would say my response to this is d3 or knight c3, but something basically straightforward in developing the pawn. Knight c3 will lead to this sacrifice probably, but I think you can play either. I think you can play queen h5 is what the engine is indicating. I'm also wondering if you can probably just play bishop takes f7 and give your king. This seems stylistically like something that the white side might like. Basically open king side, dangerous for black. So is bishop c4 an inferior move compared to knight f3? I don't think so. I mean, I think it's playable. It's just the bishop's opening. Knight f3 here. I mean, I guess it's a little better, but let's take a look. Black does get a good center in that, but he has poor king safety. Again, probably not the. I just played d3 here. It's pretty conservative, quiet, and you transpose it into a relatively normal game. Bishop's opening should be playable, but it's I don't know. It's not the normal way to get to bishop c4. I mean, basically, it has, in my eyes, like relatively limited benefits over the Italian game. So, why masters prefer to play knight f3 as opposed to bishop c4 right off the bat. It's definitely, and it leads towards positions where you can potentially have sacks on e4 if you don't play d3. I probably just play d3. I think this is fine. Black will end up, advancing c6, d5. But anyways, this is basically being looked at as an alternative to d3. Potentially. Let's take a look at that. The d4 line, is another line which will give white the center. If the goal is center control, with kind of regardless of other concepts, d4 is a way to do that. D4 queen takes d4 are pretty solid. So here, I sort of not the right idea. I see that basically, black seems to decline this gambit, but the engine analysis points pretty clearly towards knight takes e4 being playable. I don't know. I mean, it's just these, basically, the Petrov's game, I mean, it's different when you look at this position as something that came out of Petrov's. If you look at this as something that came out of the bishop's game, then you're like, okay. Basically, if you look at this as something that comes out of the bishop's game, it becomes much more normal to hang the e4 pawn. If instead, you're looking at knight f3, if you look at it as something that came out of the Petrov's, then you would be like, okay, well, why did you play bishop to c4? So depending on the move order, it actually really shifts how you might evaluate this game. So anyways, I don't want to get too hung up on this opening here because there's a lot of game after it. But here, basically, the bishop's, attacking the e6 pawn, and white's in good shape. Black hangs a pawn in this opening. Bishop e6 is not really an effective response. The best idea is d5. D5 forcing pawn takes d5, and then, it's a position that's sort of similar. I guess it has some similarities to the king's gambit. You just play h6 and knight f3, and then take back the knight after the knight is back on f3. Take back the d5 pawn. Yeah, for sure. And you can go into the fried liver as well. But this d5 here, so knight g5, d5, does have some does have some potential concepts where you can start looking at knight takes f7 as a potential move. maybe. But that's not where I would be focused on in this position. Anyways, pawn takes e6, knight takes e4, and basically black has a big center, but white has a big lead in development. He has a good space for his rook on e1. d4 can be played, and overall just many chances for white here. I think ideas, basically white has a huge developmental edge, a pre-made attack where he can start playing like, bishop a4, pawn a4, bishop c4, b4, b5, and this king side this queen side is really going to be a problem for black. White can attack this very effectively with like his queen side pawns. So looking at this situation, just as it's standing, I would probably look hard at a4, b4. B5 type attacks, and I think white will be pretty comfortable in this place. Hey, good morning, Jen. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Jen did a live stream with our friend Caitlin last night, and I hope it went well. I still haven't seen the video, to be honest, but that one's recorded, so we'll take a look at. I'm excited to watch that stream later today. Can white play something like d5 and then attack the e4 pawn? Yes, he can. That does make this e4 pawn isolated, but it's not where I would be spending time here as white. I think a4, b4, b5. Break open the queen side here. That's the plan. The e4 pawn is a little bit loose. It does provide a piece, like a potential point of vulnerability for black, but I would go with something like either knight d5. Or a4, b4, b5, and just really work to get this queen side open, because that's where the long-term position is going to be for this. I don't know. You'd have to ask Jen, Jen or Caitlin. Jen or Caitlin both. I think you guys are going to make it so it's sort of live streamed or uploaded to YouTube, right? Like there's some recording of the stream. It's great. I haven't seen it yet. I'm really excited to see it, but I haven't gotten to it yet. I asked you guys for the video, but I'm planning on watching it later today. But yeah, they're great. Always, the thing about it is, I guess if we're both going to be recorded, then you might as well, then it's less clear. But until the stream gets the recording, their stream gets the recording, feel free to watch their stream and watch mine on video on demand. I don't really care, to be honest. Oh, you guys can always watch my stream video on demand. My goal here is just free chess lessons, so not offended at all. Cool. Yeah, actually, I'll take a look at that. This is our friend Caitlin. Sorry to get diverted from the thing, but this is our friend Caitlin, and Jen was on this too. But yeah. You get when you guys get the video uploaded, people here are interested. So I want to see the video too, Jen. But they're great singers. They're really great performers, and that's an excellent stream. I know that. Well, they haven't given me the video yet. That's the thing, Electric Horse. I said they ran it. It ran at exactly the same time as my stream, so 6:05 p.m. on Friday. And I was like, well, I really want to see this, and everybody should feel free to watch theirs. But you guys said you recorded it, so I'm gonna watch it as soon as you guys send it to me or whatever. But yeah, we'll figure this out and I'll watch it. But I'm very excited to see Jen and Caitlin stream, even if we did stream at the same time. I want to see it. But yes, definitely will watch it. These Jen and Caitlin are so supportive of me that I want to make sure that I'm supportive of them. But that should be a really good video. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So getting stuck on this opening. I guess my strategy here, where I would be taking things away here, is, I know that Julio is a good gambit player. He's playing, other gambits in his repertoire, and that makes me think that he's probably a pretty good attacking player. So, what I would say from Julio's perspective is, be sure to, really be ready to attack here. I think bishop c4, a4, b4, b5 here, and you're gonna have a good attack on the king side. So that should really be your focus. You know, basically you've castled kingside, so you have no king safety issues. You can play like queen to e2, a4, bishop c4, bishop b4, and make this really dangerous for black. Play like rook to b1, but basically break open this whole queen side. I think you'll succeed if you do that. That's my recommendation there. This is great. This was a good way to do it. I'm not sure if black had to go along with you opening on d5 here. D5 seems to just worsen black's. It helps black's dark squared bishop, but it seems to open the positional by a lot. But yeah, this now I think we're really in the right part of the game. You saw it, you played it, you know, well, and basically, I think, you know, this is the right general concept. Start pushing hard on the queen side, and try to win over there. In terms of execution, I guess I would have started this a little bit earlier, and also just, you know, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but queen to d2 does allow bishop to f4, so I think that's just sort of a small tactical error. Yeah. But anyways, this is great. White's looking good here. White's looking good here, and I think starting from here, you know, start aggressively attacking. You know, start aggressively attacking the king side as soon as possible. Bishop e3 is a good move, consistent with that, but h3 is not the move that I would play here. Also, h3 I think is a little bit inefficient because your queen is already covering g4. You don't really need to cover it again. But start the attack as soon as possible. Maybe with a4 immediately. A4, bishop c4, bishop b4, and b5. You've got a good position here, and you will do well if you start attacking black on the queen side. So yeah, so I wouldn't have played bishop g5. I don't think that's the right play. I like knight d5. This sort of makes sense, but you've lost a bunch of pieces here that could have been useful for your attack. Play queen e2, a4, b4, b5. You've got a good opportunity to attack here, and you're going to be in a good place when that happens. Hey, welcome, FIFA boy. How are you? But yeah, just keep pushing. c4, d4, and then c5 coming up. I like this. Maybe, I mean, still, even in this position, you know, you have fewer pieces. I'm good, FIFA boy. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, so I would say bishop to c7, bishop focusing on a8. Overall, this should end up being good for white. a4, rook to f8, and with queen e2 here. So really, I think the thing to change here. I mean, we can go back on this a little bit, but I think in order to go with this, play queen e2. Queen e2 with threats on a6. That's where I would start placing a force. Didn't queen g4 win a pawn before? Maybe. Let's look. I mean, it's definitely possible. I think, yeah, queen g4? Yeah, sure. Queen g4 wins this pawn now. Yep. So that's an opportunity. Slight tactical improvement. c4 was played instead. I think c4 makes more sense in the broader scheme of this game. But if you want to get a solidified, you know, I'm not gonna turn down a free pawn here. Queen g4 threatening this pawn and this king. That makes sense to me. So queen g4 there makes sense as a move. I like it. Queen h5 is also sort of interesting, threatening the rook. But yes, you're right. Good eyes, Electric Horse. Yeah, no, for sure. Good catch on this. You know, good catch on this this tactical play. So this is an improvement, not one that goes along with the general theme of the game, but yep, definitely a small tactical improvement, threatening this king, winning the e4 pawn. It's real, yeah, it's real. Definitely look at that that move. But here's where, you know, I really like the position for white. Queen g4 was a good kind of quick tactic. Definitely I would say that's what you should play there, even though it's anti-thematic. But just from a general conceptual perspective, this is really kind of where you want this attack to be. It's a little bit better if the opening comes on the A file as opposed to the C file. With the open C file, basically this this attack can be more easily defended by black. You know, basically with rook c1, king goes to b8, and then rook moves to c8 on the next move, challenging your challenging your strength on the c file. So yeah, I guess in terms of ways to push this forward, I would go with I think everything's good in this position, but I would start launching an attack with a4, b4, b5, and things are good over on the queen side. The c file is also a reasonable way to break through, but I think not as good as breaking through with the b pawn. The b pawn is the one, you know, the b pawn, the a pawn are where black are really vulnerable in this position. I mean, you're getting close to even, like, you know, you could potentially even see some like back rank mate threats with an open a file. Yeah, no, totally, Eric, Electric. Yeah, feel free to send that game, and we'll take a look. But yeah, queen d2 I think is not correct. I think queen e2 is better here. Queen e2 threatens a6, pretty much putting white in a position where he's going to be vulnerable to mate. Black will probably play rook d6. Against rook d6, you can play b5. What black will probably play a5, but anyways, I like queen e2 a lot better, and it avoids this skewer. Here I think white is pretty good against black, and black is sort of just, I don't know, not really doing a whole lot. I think white is not really doing a whole lot. I think white has traded off too many pieces here. So yeah, so in slowing this down and taking a look at the opportunities for white, where white could change this game around, white's in a great position. That e6 pawn got hung. And then here's really, this is not really a tactical response, it's just a thematic response. Start attacking the black queen side, and things will be good. You've got threats on the e4 pawn, but the route that I would choose here, first I guess I would say I wouldn't have gone through and traded your minor pieces. You're attacking here, so you know when you're attacking, you want to keep minor pieces on the board. When you're not attacking, you know, that's when you want, that's when you want to trade off. Basically, the attacker needs pieces in order to successfully execute an attack. So in a position where you're attacking, you want to keep pieces on the board. In a position where you're not attacking, you want to trade pieces off. In a position where you're getting attacked, you want to trade pieces off. So trading off these two minor pieces, I think, is not a particularly good idea for black. Awesome, thanks, Electric. We'll add it probably for May 10th at 6:05. I think that's where the next open slots are. But yeah, feel free. Yeah, so here, I guess I would say, I don't know. There's just too few pieces left. Electric Horse made this great point about Queen G4 being an open tactical possibility. So like here, Queen G4 wins the E4 pawn. You should probably do that, to be honest. You know, you might as well. Threats on of rook takes E4, winning material for white, looks pretty good to me, but doesn't really fit in with the main you know, fit in with the main concepts of the attack. So yeah, so in terms of takeaway for this game, you had a few tactical improvements, specifically Queen G4 being able to be played. But the main thing that I would be focusing on, the main thematic improvement here, is A4, B4, B5. That's the way to break open this king side. I wouldn't spend time like threatening this knight. I wouldn't spend time like, you know, trying to make pushes in the center. I would just directly attack black on the queen side with moves like Queen E2, Rook B1, Bishop to C4, and you're gonna get a good payout of that attack for sure. Hey, good morning, Tarash fan. Thank you very much for joining the stream. We did some opening theory analysis. We took a look at the symmetrical English for you, Tarash, last night. Yeah, but anyways, that's where I would focus on, Julio. You know, always tactical study is good until you reach expert. So, you know, more tactical study could have probably helped you find Queen G4 in this particular case, and then later avoid Queen to D2 in this situation, allowing Bishop to F4. But the main thematic concept that I would go with is, Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Feel Good Ryan. I really appreciate it. But yeah, Black's ideas. Should Black start pushing on the king side? Yes. Yeah, the answer to that is yes. If in Black in this situation, G5, H5, G4, and get the rooks on the G and H files. Especially in what actually happened, I would start with an aggressive kingside attack. If, in a situation in which A4, B4, B5 is played, trying to open the queen side up, then that's a little bit more complicated, and I don't know whether it would. I don't know exactly where. Since it's a hypothetical attack, I don't really know where Black would be best spending time, whether it's counterattacking or attacking as well, or basically defending against the attack on the queen side. But yeah. I think White could have improved his chances here with like Queen E2, A4, B4 type attacking structure. So yeah, thank you very much for sending the game, Julio. Really appreciate you sending the game. Feel free to send more. It's great. It's super helpful because I've gotten to learn your game a little bit. Because you sent a few different games, and please keep sending them. I think it's really helpful. Having taken a look at 3 or 4 of your games, Julio, the main thing I would say is I think you may want to consider more conservative openings. These big gambits are cool, like the Stafford Gambit and the Smith-Morra Gambit are interesting and can provide quick wins potentially. But in the long term, I think you would benefit the most from playing more, more standard openings. They can be dangerous. More standard openings and improving your tactical and positional skills. That's kind of the soundest way that I see for you to improve, and I think that'll be really helpful. Yeah, of course. No, thank you for sending it, Vertwitch. Sorry to, yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad that I was able to get to it, and thank you very much for sending the game for the stream. Please keep sending more games for the stream. The best way to do it is through Discord. But whatever works. And I'm very happy to keep reviewing them. Oh yeah, sure. I mean, if it's chess related, Tarash, I'm happy to answer it. But yeah. Let's take a look at Zipcag's game. Here we go. Thank you very much for sending the games, Julio. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you keep sending games because they're very interesting, and I feel like I'm learning. I'm definitely learning some openings from them as well, especially like Stafford type things. Okay. So Zipcag, if you're here, no, it's just send whatever you like. I mean, to be quite honest, it's a little easier for me to pick up things to improve in games that are less strong. But, I'm happy to look at anything. No one plays perfect games. I mean, you could come up with different ideas or at least explanation instructional material off of Grandmaster games. So, really just send whatever you like. That's excellent, Tarash. I don't know specifically blunders versus wins, but it's sort of a little bit about sample size. I mean, I definitely think you're on the right track from training. I really like I think Tarash is doing things perfectly. If anyone wants to know what Tarash is doing 2 hours of tactical study a day. And I think that if you do that, you will definitely improve. I'd highly recommend that Tarash's training strategy to anyone else who's watching. I guarantee you will improve from that, like long term. I think in terms of reducing blunders, I think it's really helpful. I think I don't think it matters to be completely honest, Willem. Whatever works, either chess.com, Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, Chess Tempo, or CT-ART. I like Battle myself. Battle helps you see the most in the quickest amount of time, so that's what I like. For longer term games, I think it depends on what you're training for. For Blitz, up to probably game in 30, Puzzle Battle is an excellent choice. For game in 3 hours or 40, 120, game 60 or whatever, probably Survival's better. But really, just spending the time either way is good. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I would just say whatever you can spend, whatever is the most fun for you, and whatever you're willing to spend the most time on. But it's definitely the right training regimen for anyone under expert level for sure. Um, yeah, so it's up to you. Puzzle battle, the advantage is you can see 1,000 puzzles. Let me think about that. You can see 900 puzzles an hour, 30 puzzles in 3 minutes, so 900. So yeah, if you're doing 900 puzzles an hour or seeing 900 positions an hour, you're gonna improve that way. So that's why I sort of like puzzle battle. In terms of longer, more less superficial tactics, probably puzzle survival could work. But anyways, I would say just spend a lot of time with those tools. You can circle back later and learn strategy, but tactical strength will help you now, and will help you improve now. So yeah, I think for sure, Tarash. It sounds great. Catching the ideally, tactical study is going to help you on both sides of that, both avoiding the small blunders, your opponent's tactics, and finding your own mate and twos, mate and threes in games, that kind of stuff. But yeah, as just the main thing I would say, Aphelion, is as much as possible. Either whatever's the most fun for you, whatever you end up spending the most time on. I would say a mix is probably the best. I would go, in your situation, Aphelion, I would be studying maybe 50% puzzle battle and 50% puzzle survival. But you should do what you're most comfortable with. But I think that will really help. Just spend the time. Tarash's strategy of 2 hours a day is awesome. I can't imagine him not improving from that. I think it will really, really help. So yeah, it's both. And the truth of the matter is, both will help improve your game. I mean, before tactics training, if you can cut out your blunders, that's 100 points there or something, or some amount of points there. And if you can find more mate and twos, mate and threes, and winning positions, that's 100 points on that side too. So even if you're only seeing improvement on one side immediately, just keep at it. Even if you're only improving one side, just keep at it. But I think long term you'll improve both of those from regular tactical study. Awesome, cool. That's great, Aphelion. I think you're really on the right track. Yeah, I mean Tarash is going all out on the chess, which is awesome, and I think he'll really end up in a good position doing that kind of self study. Very strong stuff. Good discipline, and I highly recommend everyone else go with that much time spent on the tactical side. I think that's really a good plan. Anyways, you've got so yeah, I don't have any specifics on that. I think long term you'll improve both sides, both the errors and the opportunities, Tarash. That's my guess. Okay, I want to take a look at Zipcag's game. Zipcag is playing white, and I want to make sure because I have two different games here. I think this is the one you meant to send. This is the Karokon from 215, I believe. But we'll take a look. Yeah, no, totally. I think if you crank out a lot of I'm not sure. You made the recommendation, Tarash, for some English theory, and I took a look at the symmetrical English last night. Hopefully that's sort of what you were interested in. But keep sending material and ideas, Tarash. Please do. It's super helpful. It makes life so much easier when I can do a good job preparing ahead of time for all the games and ideas and stuff. So yeah, everyone keep sending stuff, and sure, yeah, thank you very much for saying. No, it's my bad. I should have clarified sooner. But yeah, let's look at the 281. Are you're playing white, right? Yeah, no problem at all, Zipcag. I've got both. Here you go. And I figured out how to import from the study as well. Sorry, that shouldn't have taken me as long as it did, but now I'm good on that. Cool. So Zipcag's playing white against the Karokon. D takes e4. Zipcag plays the mainline Karokon. I think that makes a lot of sense. And here, white's got an interesting position. F3 I don't know super well. I know this is a gambit. I know it's an accepted gambit. It's got a name to it, I'm sure. The Raza Studier gambit. Here I think maybe knight F3. Yeah. Yep, it takes both, Electric. It's both tactics and strategy. But I'm happy that that you're getting value out of this. Very happy to hear that it was at least somewhat helpful. But both, at the end of the day, it needs to be both. Your strategies aren't going to work without accurate execution, and accurate execution is going to be aimless without strategies. So you do need both. But I would say, from a big picture perspective, people often neglect the tactical side of things. So I think that tactics alone is enough to really get you up to almost, frighteningly high, almost master level, really. But definitely, expert level. I would say go very, very heavy on the tactics in terms of training. And it's not something you can teach, really. It's just you have to sit in front of the computer and do, an hour or two of tactics training. It'll really help. Yeah, basically. So, you could become a romantic level master, or a romantic era master or whatever. Yeah. So F3 is interesting. I don't know this super well, but it does put a more open position together for White against the Caro-Kann. Puts White in a pretty aggressive position. A Caro-Kann player probably isn't expecting this. A Caro-Kann player is expecting, basically no attack on F7. Bishop C4 is kind of an interesting move here. I don't know. Yeah, interesting point, Electric. I know the classic book is the one by Block, which is like Block's tactical book is considered to be like one of the best ones. But yeah, I've done all the Block tactics through chess-based modules, but yeah, you would run out of books, even good books. The Block book is very good. If you yeah, Master Games. Masters could probably find excellent lines and strategies. It's interesting. So yeah, even the Block book I did through a computer at this point. I basically have not done any book tactics since there's actually a few good there's one I'll show you guys just because I think it was a good classic. I think it was called Basic Chess Tactics. I can't remember exactly what it was called. Sorry, I don't mean to get distracted, but I actually want to show you this one. Yeah, it's called the Chess Tactics Workbook. I'll show you. I learned this one a very long time ago, but I'll pull it up for you guys just because I think it's worth the look. This is the one that I learned on. Just so you guys know, I have definitely some like nostalgia about this. But it's this Chess Tactics Workbook. I should recommend this one to people who are under 1,000, because this one this is probably the first and one of the few chess books that I read before I was looking at computer stuff. This is the Chess Tactics Workbook that got me up to about 1,000. So I definitely have nostalgia about this one. It's a great book though. It goes through all like the the mate and threes and like the really basic ones. So if you're looking for any chess tactics books for beginners, this one is one that I recommend. It's probably been around for 40 years, 50 years, but it's an old classic. Anyways, this is the one of the books that I read growing up. Anyway, sorry to get distracted with that. But yeah, so bishop c4, e6. Bishop c4 is kind of interesting here. It is definitely the most natural place to place this bishop. But at the same time, black hasn't played e5, so it can be shut down pretty easily with e6. Makes me wonder if it's the right diagonal for the bishop, but I don't know. Anyways, bishop c4 makes sense here. I think that's what happened in the game, right? Yep, it looks like the most healthy diagonal. Maybe move back to bishop to d3, but you can start putting pressure on yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a great one, FIFA boy. You know, at this point, you can probably go through, you know, chess tactics trainer or you know, chess tactic trainers online. But that one's really a classic. So if you're under 1,000 and want to learn tactics, just go through that one front to back like 3 or 4 times. I think it'll actually really help. Yeah, for sure. 5-3-3-4 tactics is great. The Polgar one. Yep, good. I've done that one on Chess Base module as well. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. I usually go with the ones I go with the computer oriented ones now, the chess.com puzzle battle. But there's a lot of classics too. There's at this point there's plenty of material, thankfully. Cool. So white gets a really good position. White wins this game pretty well. Yeah, for sure. Good. Thank you for giving the focus, Zipcag. Yeah, I'll definitely focus on that. Okay, so you know this is a gambit, right? So you know, in these gambit openings, you're basically playing from behind. That is fine, and you often get the practical compensation to make it worth it. But you know, in this situation where you have you know 0.7, you're down by 0.75 pawns or something. You know, you really need to prove that the value of the gambit by winning material and capitalizing on quicker development. So you know, in order to win this game, you know, in a normal situation, white needs to win 1 pawn or something to get a winning position, or to be up 1 pawn on the eval. Here, based on this situation, white needs to win 1.78 pawns to you know, get a winning eval. You know, that's the definition of a gambit. That's fine. You know, you're playing for practical compensation. But the rest of the game is going to be about how white gets from minus 0.78 to plus 0.78. So that's where white starts. And white's goal is to continue to push on that eval in his direction. You're already off to a great place here. You've equalized, but yeah, and now you know I think you've got the beginnings of a great attack here, Zipcag. It's going to require good tactical execution, but I really like the way that you can play like Rook G3, threaten the G3, G7 pawn, and get pressure on the king here. I think that's great. With castles here, I would probably play Rook H3. That's just seems like the most intuitive way to go about this. You know, the thing about Rook on H3 is that sometimes Rook H3 can be a pretty dangerous place to have your rook, but if the white squared bishop is gone, then there's nothing that can really attack it there. Here it's basically just providing a resource to attack on H7. You know, you will have to advance the G pawn probably, to get a pawn in your attack, seeing as you've blocked in the H2 pawn. But I think you can do this. I think in this particular case, you can do this one with just pieces. Black only has 1 defensive piece this knight. You know, if you can get 3 or 4 white attacking pieces onto this attack, I think you can overwhelm him without even introducing the pawns here. I think Black's king safety is not particularly good. So you can just like get 3 pieces up and attacking the king, and you'll be in a good place. Rook F1, Queen B6, Rook H3, threatening the H7 pawn. Awesome. And here you've got an attack on the knight. And really, just in terms of pieces that Black has for defense and pieces that you have for offense, overall, I think you're in a good place. I mean, you have bishop, rook, queen, and maybe even this bishop if it can get over to this f7 square. So overall, I think this is going to be an overwhelming attack. The engine's still saying that Black has a positive eval, but practically speaking, I think you're in a great place, and that's your goal out of the gambit opening. I like all this. This looks cool. So yeah, but yeah, I guess I would say probably big picture, try to avoid trading off pieces. You need the pieces for an attack. Great tactic. This wins. Awesome. So after rook takes f6, white plays queen h4 and wins. But I want to go to the pieces that are, or the moves before that. So basically the pieces between or the moves. But I'm interested in looking at the moves between g6 and rook takes f6, because that goes from when white's attacking to when white wins. Here you do have a legitimately good attack. Yeah, but you know, Zipkag, I think you make a good point, but I think you've got to. I think that's fine. I think your attack here actually happens to be strong enough that that you can pretty much hang b2, c2, and that doesn't really matter that much. I wouldn't worry about, you know, it's a hard determination to make, like when you should just go all out and attack, or when you should you know, pay attention to material. But I think in this particular case, you have enough pieces attacking the king side that you can just really go all out and hang b2 and c2. It's tough. I don't know how you could make that calculation. I think it's sort of just a judgment thing. I'm thinking about how, like, a more systematic way that you could evaluate that. But in this case, I think you're fine losing the queenside pawns. Yeah, those kingside attacks can be great with those pawn storms. But they usually the best attacks, the best kingside pawn storms come when the king has castled queenside. Here I think you can do this attack pretty well with the pieces. But yeah, those kingside attacks are awesome. I mean, there's a lot that come up in the Sicilian. There's a lot that come up in the Italian game. I think sometimes they even come up in d4 openings. But those pawn storm attacks are great. Yeah, those that is a funny point, Tarash. Doesn't bishop g5 win some material? Good question. I was wondering the same thing, Willem. I think, doesn't knight e7 hold? Let's look at bishop g5. Oh, knight d7. Okay. Yeah, I think knight d7 is holds this together at least for a few more moves. But good question, Willem. I think knight d7 is the response here. I still like white's position much better than I like black's position. Yeah, this is overall pretty aggressive attacks on the black king side. But yeah, rook h3, g6 I like. This all looks good. But where does the attack slip away? It's tough to tell exactly. I'm thinking knight e4. Knight e4 is probably an improvement for white. Bishop e5 I think is not the best. I think bishop e5 causes more problems than it fixes. Bishop e5 basically is a bishop that can't be maintained there, because this pin is there. So I think this is a tactical misstep. This is really a tactical position. So I'm thinking like maybe bishop. Man, so it's sort of tricky. Knight e4 is probably the best. The reason why is because knight f6 is an effective defensive piece here, and knight e4 brings a piece that hadn't yet been used for white's attack, and takes away one of black's defenders, or deactivates one of black's defenders. So I think knight e4 brings an extra piece into white's attack, and that's why knight e4 is the best move. Bishop e5 also more directly adds a piece to white's attack, but it's vulnerable to knight to d7. So I think what you should do here is knight to e4. Engine is also suggesting knight to a4. I think you can pretty much throw that move away. I don't like knight a4 at all. It brings a piece away from the attack. You know, this is a position where white's, you know, basically white's goals have been pretty well signaled. White's going to attack the king and the king side here. So I would play knight to e4 and take out this extra defender. You've got 4 pieces basically facing towards the king side, and white's got 1 defender. If you can trade off the defender, then you'll just have 4 pieces attacking the king, and it's going to be really difficult for black to hold off on that. So I think, yeah, I think this is really just I think part of it is tactical in the sense that bishop e5, is a tactically, is not a great tactical play just because knight d7 responds to it effectively. But from a strategic perspective, you want to bring in this knight from c3 to attack the defender. If you can use a piece that's not yet being used in the attack and use it to take out one of the defenders in an attack, that's something that you really want to do. So knight e4 for that reason I think is the best move. It's going to be I'm not saying it's impossible, but this is just brutal for black to defend against. You got the rook, bishop, rook, and probably even this bishop's going to come in. Also, this bishop's threatening some stuff with bishop e6, maybe potentially bishop takes e6, queen takes e6. Basically, all of white's, this is how you and you were very close in the game, but this is how you formulate a very solid attack. Just get all of your pieces attacking at the same time, and it's going to be a nightmare for black to deal with all this. I can't see black withstanding this attack with accurate tactical play. So overall, very good formulation of an attack. I think just the conceptual improvement is bringing in a piece that wasn't involved in the attack and using it to immediately remove one of the defenders for black. This is great. So knight e4 for conceptual reasons I think is the best way to advance this here. Knock out this knight. Without the knight, I mean, what can black defend with? Almost nothing. So knight e4 I like. Bishop e5 falls tactically to knight to d7. So that's I think where the misstep in this attack was. Use a piece that's not being used in the attack and use it in the attack. From a conceptual perspective is the right way to do it. So knight e4 is an improvement there. Still here, you've got king h1 makes sense, queen g3 makes sense. But yeah, this has slipped away a bit from white. So yeah, it is. I mean, it is, and you really do have to calculate this correctly. I'm thinking bishop takes f6. Maybe, I don't know, bishop f4. But it goes against sort of the fundamental principle, which is when you are attacking, you want to keep all your pieces on because you need pieces to attack your opponent with. When you yeah, I mean, the bishop is definitely more valuable than this knight. I mean, what ends up happening in this game is this knight on b8 ends up getting traded for this bishop on f4. If you look at it in those terms, you can clearly see like the bishop on f4 is a more valuable piece for white than this knight is for black. But also, really just attacks are important to do as quickly as possible. So you want to bring in all the force as quickly as possible. Knight to d4 I think is the play, hitting this knight f6, and I think after knight to e4, you're really in a good place. This is good for white. Pretty much all of white's pieces are focused on the king side, and black does not have enough pieces to defend against it. So knight e4 was the move. And also, so I would think about it in the framework of how do you bring as much force into your attack as possible, and I would think about it in the framework in what happened in this game as, you're trading this bishop on f4 for this knight on b8. Is that a good trade for you? And then I think you would be more likely to play moves that avoid the trading of your bishop. That's why I think that's generally good for white, and I think those are the terms by which you can think about it. You formulated a great attack here. I think after knight e4, black's going to be pretty close to getting busted here. Yeah, no, I hope that's helpful. But I think that's kind of the strategic way to conceptualize this. So threats on h7 I think are going to be good for white. Knight takes, queen takes is fine. It does trade off a piece, but it trades off a piece that was uninvolved in the attack versus a piece that was involved in the defense. So this would be an example of a worthwhile trade in an attacking situation. But yeah, I think that this generally is better for white. So after after trading off that bishop for that knight, the attack is just not as frightening for black as it otherwise would be. Still, I think you've got stuff like knight e4 and getting pieces into the mix, but I think that the trading off that good bishop for that undeveloped knight is not an ultimately great trade for white there. So I hope that's helpful, and thank you very much for asking the question. I think that's it's super helpful when you, and this, by the way, very good tactic. Good job seeing queen h4 here. Pretty killer, and ends the game. Good work with that tactic. But yeah, I think basically, I think it's super helpful when people ask questions relating to their games, because that gives me a very good sense of where to focus the analysis. The answer is the attack shifted when you traded this well-developed bishop for this undeveloped knight. If you bring more force in to knock out the defender, I think this ends up playing out a lot better for white. So yeah, thanks for asking the question. Thank you very much for sending the game, Zipcag, and good job formulating an attack. And I hope this is helpful. It's a strong attack. This should win with knight e4. So good work. Thank you for sending the game, and yeah, thank you very much for being a part of the stream. Now we've got a Traxler game for Aphelion. Yeah, no problem, guys. Yeah, no, feel free to send as many as you want. You sent a few this time. That's always helpful. The more you send, and the more I can work ahead, basically, and the more I can do preparation ahead of time. So yeah, thanks all for being here and for sending games. No, it's fine. We've taken a few looks at the Traxler, which is a really cool opening. The Traxler, I think we can publicize the Traxler, and the Aphelion line in the Traxler, which I'm still waiting for full definition of. I think if Aphelion writes out the line that he would like to be named after him, I will try to make sure that we at least name it after him. So yeah, pick out which line is currently unnamed and which one you want ascribed to you, and I'll describe it as that in the stream going forward. So yeah, so the Traxler's an opening that is very aggressive for black. It's a sacrifice. So it comes out of the two knights response to I'm serious. If you come up with a line like out to move like 8 or 9 that doesn't currently have a name, we can just call it the Aphelion variation and see if it sticks. That could be interesting. So I mean, I'll call it that. And things, it might work. Who knows? But yeah, so yeah, knight g5. I mean, it doesn't have to be, I know people with opening lines named after them. It's definitely something that one can do. All it takes to have the opening be named something is to have people call it that. Or enough people call it that, and maybe have it published that way. Like, I know people, like Maxime Dlugi. Hey, Richard, thank you very much for joining in. Sorry for my slow response, Richard, but thank you very much for being here, Richard, and yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for being here. But yeah, yeah, if I know people with lines named after them. All it takes is people calling it that. But yeah, so this is the two. This is basically the bishop and knight. Against two knights. So this quick, this quick knight g5 is what allows the Traxler. Here the main line is d5. Objectively speaking, this is probably the best for black. It sort of shuts down, everything and sort of turns it into a more, basically in the same way that you can shut down good pieces of the King's Gambit with d5. This basically stops the game. Like, e takes d5, knight a5, and not really great chances for white to advance here. Knight a5, and you're pretty much good. In terms of what makes it the Traxler, why it's defined as the Traxler is not the mainline d5. It's bishop to c5. And with bishop to c5, there's a lot of crazy sacrifices that come into play on bishop takes f2. So just so everyone knows what the Traxler is, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight g5, and then instead of d5, bishop c5, which hangs the or sacrifices the f7 pawn. This leads to a lot of interesting things. Bishop takes, I think, is objectively the best for white. Bishop takes, and then king e7, and then bishop d5, and then rook f8. This is probably black's best way to play this. It's it's definitely more kind of calm. It leads to basically it leads to situations where a lot of pressure is getting forced on f2. You can play knight takes d5, I think, but overall this sort of neutralizes the attack. So bishop takes, queen e7, d5, and basically, missteps here can really be fatal. And by the way, so bishop takes f7, I think, is objectively the best line for white. Knight takes f7 also frequently gets played. Here what you do is you play bishop takes f2. King takes f2 leads, I think, to a almost forced draw, if I remember correctly. After knight takes e4, this basically turns into a draw. King e3 is the best line for white. But it leads into something that we know to be a book draw here. Going the other direction, knight takes f7, bishop takes, king f1. This is better for white. White is pretty solid here. This sort of shuts down some of his attacking chances. In this case, you play queen e7, knight takes h8, e to d5, e takes, knight d5, and here's, this is very quiet, but it basically is a fatal misstep for white, and I think the point of this miniature. So bishop g4 is a brilliant move, gets the full brilliancy from chess.com, which is the great symbol of validness of a move or strength of a move. It's the highest authority is this teal color, yeah, I mean, it gets it though. So queen d2, I think, is after queen d2, black is much better. Now he's got these bishops, basically aiming down on the king, and with c3, knight d4, so pawn takes d3, or pawn takes d4, and what happens? Something terrible, I'm sure. Queen f6. Queen f4 is the best move, but with the king moving, the win is knight to e2 mate. After bishop takes e2, queen takes f2, or queen takes f2, and bishop takes, and then mate's coming basically on f2. Pretty brutal. But yeah. So this is a great miniature. So let's go through it again. Just a really cool miniature game. Bishop g4, queen d2, bishop h4, c3, knight to e4, and yeah, now basically mate there. Nice. Okay, so knight takes d2 in this situation. Yeah, so bishop g4, queen d2, bishop to h4, c3, and then basically threats on this king on f1. Awesome. Good stuff for black. Cool. Good threats on f2. Win on f2. Nice. Yep, queen f6 threatening the king. In terms of sidelines, we can go through and look knight d4, knight takes d2, wins. But I think anything after d3 is really just fatality. This is pretty bad. Let's see c3. C3, and it's much more complicated. But again, we're not. This opening is not one played to be sound. It's sort of one to get a quick win. Yeah. Yep, knight e4, having this knights on e4, we can just play through this. C takes d4, queen f6, and threats coming on the king. Pawn takes d4, queen f6, and threats coming on the king. and then ignoring both of them. You know, I mean, what can you even do? The queen's basically checkmated here, right? So there's nothing else. There's nothing else stemming from that. Just rough. Yeah, no, it's a win. It's awesome. It's great. You know, it's cool when White's willing to play into this. It leads to some very aggressive attacks. Win on move 9, pretty brutal. But overall, very interesting stuff. As always, very cool miniature game. We can just go through to the start. And just so everyone knows what the Traxler is, once again, knight f6, so 2 knights response to the Italian game. Knight g5, this aggressive knight line threats on f7, and then bishop c5 as opposed to d5. D5, pawn takes d5, knight a5. You know, it's pretty much an equal normal game, but bishop c5, the most aggressive response, leads to this crazy opening, and can lead which can lead to some very quick wins for black. It's very interesting, cool. Yeah, cool miniature game over by move 14, straight to checkmate. Yeah, keep sending them, Aphelion. They're always interesting to see, and it's cool when you get them. It's like basically the full opening line here. Let me know which line you'd like to be named the Aphelion opening. I'll play it if you pick an opening line and you keep sending me Traxler games. I'll play through your opening line every time you send a Traxler game. That's the deal that I'll make. So yeah, thank you for sending it, Aphelion, and I appreciate it, and we'll go on to the next one. This is Ansh's game, but thank you, Aphelion. Thank you for sending it, and pick out your opening line and send me the opening line, and we'll call it the Aphelion opening from now on. Cool. Thanks, Aphelion. So yeah, so this is Ansh versus RV Phil. If you guys, I don't know if you guys are into it or you guys are in it already, but these two players, Ansh is the owner and RV Phil is an admin of the Chess Study Group Discord. I'll just post the link to that here. If you yeah, I mean, you know, not immediately. I think the next slots are probably on Monday. But yeah, if you send a game, we'll take a look at it, Tarash. It's great. You know, we've gotten games super far ahead now, so it takes a little bit longer. But yeah, keep sending games. Keep sending things over. I'm super interested in seeing them. So yeah, this is Ansh versus the Discord is for the Chess Study Group Discord. I just wanted to give them a shout out because this is Ansh's game for white and RV Phil's game as black. Yeah, interesting stuff. Interesting Discord. I don't know if you guys are also in the you know, that Discord is the Chess Study Group Discord. I guess I'll also post my personal Discord since we're doing that right now. But the second one, this one that I'm posting now, is this is the my personal Discord for this stream. But anyways, this one is from Ansh and RV Phil, who are admins on the yeah, sure, admins on the Chess Study Group side. It's a good Discord. I've got a full section there as well. Yeah, so here I think you know, it's the French defense, normal variation with no d5. Interesting. Not an opening that I know super well, but I know one that, you know, exists and has book theory to it. So yeah, b6 is a book move. It's pretty passive. It's a flank opening. Bishop b7 threatening e4. Knight c3, bishop b7, a3, knight f6, and yeah, sorry for the thing. It's pretty good. I'm not super good with I'm not super good with Discord, to be honest, but it's a good Discord for sure. So knight f6, knight f3. And black is looking pretty solid. I think I would play bishop to d3 here. I think you do need to defend the e4 pawn. I think this is not a valid gambit. I think you want to play bishop d3 or f3. Bishop d3 seems to be a reasonably good diagonal for the bishop to be on. If this transposes into a more normal French with d5, e5, the bishop will be on a good diagonal. So I think an improvement, as opposed to giving up this e4 pawn, I think you would just want to play bishop to d3, and it'll be effectively defended, and you can start attacking on h7 or whatever. So yeah, bishop d3, and I think you're pretty much good. So I offer that as a potential improvement to this game. Bishop d6 is probably not necessary here. I would probably play d6, I think, and then you have this bishop can't really get into this c7 square. So I would say that's probably black's best response. This just seems unnecessarily awkward. Like, you're doubling pawns, and I'm sure it's fine, and you're getting more pawns in the center. Sure, it's fine, but just from a fundamental perspective, I would aim to not double your pawns if you don't have to. I would just keep this as like the standard standard small center, and work from there. So yeah, bishop d6, bishop takes, pawn takes, g3, bishop g2. All of this, I think, is this is all seems pretty intuitive. b4, I don't know if b4 does too much. So an important thing in terms of understanding this position is why is b4 considered to be kind of a not considered to be a great move by the eval. I think understanding this one is pretty important. So in this position, you have this pawn structure, and you have this c file facing towards the c3 pawn. Currently, it's a semi-open file, and with b4, this pawn becomes a backwards pawn, and you get these rook threats on this open file against c3. So I think conceptually, this this b4 move, which creates a backwards pawn on an open file for black, is something that you want to avoid. Here, everything is basically defending itself. It's just all working. So I think instead, queen e2, rook e1, rook d1, and basically you're pretty good as white. b4 instead is something that provides an additional vulnerability for black against white here. This open file against that c pawn. That from a fundamental perspective is not the right idea. This pawn will become a liability that white needs to look after for the rest of the game. I understand you're gaining space on the queen side here, but this provides a very well-established target for black to attack, and that's why b4 is considered to be the incorrect move. Black sees this and moves his rook to the open file, attacking the backward pawn. So rook c8, I think, is correct. Here, I think you can just... okay, so I'm just looking at what happened here. Yeah, so this got pretty aggressive. But yeah, b4, I think it offers an improvement. In terms of how the game is going so far, hanging e4, I think, is a fixable error. I think bishop to d3, and you develop with a defensive move, that should be pretty smooth. And I like d6 more than I like bishop d6. Bishop d6 is also fine, but I like d6 because it doesn't double the pawns. And then you have this pretty good structure for white here. I like this structure for white. I think this is pretty solid. And here, b4 I think is really the error. b4 plays out, and then c3 becomes vulnerable. I think just not playing moves like queen e2, rook e1, things that are unambiguously improvements to white's pieces. I think those are the moves that are an improvement over b4. So I would take a look at b4 and pay attention to all the components of the pawn structure that it impacts. This c3 pawn being the target. White defends pretty effectively against threats on c3. Sort of bounces around for a few moves, but I think things shift pretty seriously towards black now that this open file and the c3 pawn's been taken, and black is up material. So yeah, the real key components of this game are things that I think with a little analysis can easily be improved on for the next game. Here, bishop d3. Definitely make sure that the e4 pawn is defended. I've hung the e4 pawn. I've played openings actually similar to that Petrov one, where the e4 pawn gets hung. But bishop d3 does a few good things for you. It develops the bishop to a good square and defends the e4 pawn. Very helpful. Here, I think you play c3, and white is basically fine. Black has the advantage. Black's a pawn up. But in terms of positional characteristics, I think c3, gives you a solid pawn structure. You're down a pawn, so you're going to need to come up with some way to equalize this thing. I think the best idea is probably to get the knight to e5 after f4. So like knight d2, trade bishops, f4, knight f3, and knight to e5. I think that's probably your best strategy for white. But b4 creates a weakness for white. It causes more problems than it solves. So that's the move that I would focus on, and I think the main one responsible for the outcome of this game. In general, you really just don't want backward pawns on open files. That's a positional truth that I think is pretty much always going to be true. The C file is dangerous for something. The C file can be very dangerous in the Sicilian. I recognize this isn't a Sicilian, but it now has some similar characteristics to one. This open C file for black. So B4 gains space on the queen side, but at the cost is too high. I would play knight D2, and then F4, and then strengthen E5. And here, I think the position's basically decided after the rook effectively gets in. You should, basically, winning c3 is enough of a problem for white, who's already down a pawn, that you should expend every resource to try to defend it. I don't know, maybe that's queen, but a3 is hanging now too. This gets just dangerous. Maybe a4 here. But the c3 pawn is hanging, so it needs to be defended. Here, maybe, as opposed to b5, queen d2. Or sorry, this is hanging too, so knight e2, knight e1, queen d2. But really, a lot of things stem from this move b4 from white. Just make sure, really make sure that you're not hanging, or you're not exposing backward pawns to open files if you don't have to. That's a big pawn structure thing, big positional concept. And I think with that, I think you end up in much better position. Yeah, thank you very much for sending the game, Anch. Really interesting. Improvements, I would say, watch the e4 pawn. This was costly. And then the larger positional consideration, watch out for creating backward pawns on open files. That often is, that can be very difficult. Like all things in chess, it depends a little bit on position. But those principles, I think, are the important ones that made this game, that were decisive in this game. Awesome. Thank you very much for sending it, Ahmet. Sorry, Anch. Yeah, please keep sending them. Super interesting. Appreciate it. And yeah, so that was Anch's game, and we're now on to Ahmet's game. Ahmet's playing black here. And Ahmet plays an opening that I don't particularly know. Somehow this transposes into the perk. I guess this sort of transposes into the French now, or something. Wait, what is this? I don't even know what to call this exactly. Interesting opening. White can play pawn takes e5, or pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, queen takes d8 here. Boris Privman used to play this as black, and it leads to an interesting position because, it leads to a situation where basically white's not going to have incredible attacking chances. But this leads to an interesting situation where white has a lead, but black can't really, but has a difficult time with the pieces available to him executing the lead. So f5, pawn takes, queen there, and yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, I believe that. That makes sense to me. I mean, bishop takes g3 is yeah, right. So yeah, I guess you have to play it all the way to queen c7, bishop d6. I think at amateur level though, you could snag tons of people playing bishop takes g3. It seems like a very intuitive move. So if you're Caro Kann comes with that pre-made hook in on h6. So I still like it. I didn't even know that thing was there till or I didn't know that opening was there until you showed me. So interesting. Okay. So f5, bishop takes, queen h5, and basically black is fine here. This plays out well for black. F5 I think is a pretty good idea, but generally just developing moves. This pawn structure is not particularly good for white. I don't think there's much of an advancement playing d4 versus d5, and with g6, bishop d1. This is pretty good. So where did white really misstep here? Queen d1 is fine, c6 is fine, c3 is slow. I don't know if that I think adds to black's advantage. And the real slip here is knight f3. Basically black has neutralized white's center. And then with d3 or with knight f3, black can play e4 and fork the queen and knight. So e4 here wins the game pretty much. I mean, it wins a full piece. Should win. White sees this and plays queen c2. And black wins. Okay, cool. So improvements here for black. Overall, I think, it was a pretty reasonable way to play against a sort of self-destructive opening by white. F5 is definitely aggressive. It does challenge white's center as quickly as possible, but it does open the king side. I don't think it's bad. I think this makes sense as a general idea. Queen h5 I don't think is particularly useful. What does it do? It basically just gets black to play g6, and g6 is a fine move for black to play. I don't really think this moves white forward in any way. And now black's got a lead in development and a better center. So overall, I think, yeah, f5. I mean, f5 is a very aggressive way to play this. I don't think it's wrong necessarily, but yeah, that is an interesting idea. G6, queen d1, and black has both the better center and better development. So this should be good for black, I think. Bishop takes, d5, and then e4. So in terms of improvement, the first one that f5 is a cool idea. I don't know, this isn't really well-established opening, so like we can take a look at that, this f5 move, how common this comes up. But f5 is an interesting, I mean, either way, black's just going to play g6. So I think black's just going to be cool after g6 regardless. c5 is an idea. I'm sort of impressed at this breakdown of moves though. Like, this is a cool idea actually. In terms of looking at this eval, let's just look at the eval here. Okay, so d6, d5, and f5 is the third most popular move. I mean, the engine's recommending knight f6, bishop e7, and then f5 is number 3. But overall, I like kind of the novelty of that idea. The move played here is overwhelmingly c5. C5 is transposes into old Benoni, but f5 here is like played once out of every 2,000 games at master level, and I don't think it's objectively that bad. I mean, it basically works hard to neutralize white's center, and puts pressure on white. Yeah, so it's g6. It's g6 either way instead of taking on f5. But f5 is a really cool idea. This transposes into something. I think that's funny, Aphelion. I like that. Yeah. So C4 is goes into a perk line, but F5 is very interesting. Usually, what's played here is C4 here after F5, C4, and then F takes E4, and then sort of similar lines, but actually really pretty interesting, to be honest. Interesting. No, it's funny. Yeah. So knight C3 threats on E4, and then overall G6, C6. And I feel like black is just fine. Black plays E4 and all's good. So yeah, I think here black is solid up a rook. That material loss was pretty bad. I don't know what happened exactly. Rook takes E5, D5 is clearly wrong. Yeah, black ends up mating. Awesome. In terms of better ideas here, maybe, what could we do here? D4, E5, F5, G6, bishop, queen B1. I think here basically, black is fine. Knight F. Basically this is an interesting way to play this. Interesting and unusual way to play this opening. This involves better development for black. It involves better center control for black. And overall here, I think black's just got a good position. The knight plays to f3. I play e4 here, winning the piece. But that's really the only improvement that I see for black in this game. Everything else sort of made intuitive sense to me. Nothing huge there. Yeah, and rook h1, cool. But yeah, interesting way, interesting opening, kind of a new one that I haven't seen before. This f5 move, very creative and new idea, cool. And basically black neutralizes white's queenside, or white's center by move 8. So, how bad could this be, really? e4 is the move here. And then rook takes e5 was a fatal error for white. But overall, good game. The only move that I would look at is one that I think you would see with a little bit of tactical study, just that e4. E4 right here puts black a piece ahead, and you win. This should be a winning advantage. Full piece should be good. So. Yeah, overall, really interesting position. Thank you very much for sending it, Amet. Thank you for introducing me, at least, to this this f5 response to this opening. I don't know what this opening is called. This e4 d5 structure, but it's definitely f5, pawn takes, bishop takes. Cool, makes sense. Yeah. White played quickly. Yeah, I mean, but it was a game in 10, though, so, 4 minutes is not, a ridiculously quick game. Rook to h1. Yeah, cool. Good win. Good win, Amet. Thank you very much for sending that game. It's an interesting one. Cool, and then the last one is from Leaf Saez. I'll pull that up now. Leaf Saez is playing white. And let's take a look. Okay, cool. London system, great. I really like the London system. I think it's really solid, and it's been objectively shown to be like one of the best openings for white. It's basically just a solid, slow advantage. Very popular with Magnus and computers and the objective, the objectively best players. I think bishop f4 makes a lot of sense. It's just very kind of calm, pressing advantage. Winds up with a good position for white in a great majority of games. Black hangs the piece, apparently. So there's definitely an improvement. Queen takes h5, taking the hanging knight. But I'll assume this is probably like a blitz game or a bullet game, so we can just kind of move past it. But that knight was hanging on h5 for a second there. Now we got sort of a more normal London system position. White's pawns are a little bit more fractured than they could be. All this trading, pawn takes d5 leads to an interesting position. But I think white can handle all of this with like either bishop b5 or queen g4. Basically this pawn seems vulnerable. But when you look at it, really the only piece that can possibly attack it is this knight. So bishop b5, and if black is shooting to win this pawn, he'll probably have to play queen to g5. But I vote bishop to g5 here, holding back this knight. Queen g4 is also an idea. In this case, if knight takes e5, queen takes g7, and that has to be good for white. Basically this rook is under attack. You could play knight g6, but then rook takes h7. White will be up a pawn. Overall, I think this is a good idea. So bishop to g5, bishop to b5, I think is the way for white to play this. F4 does defend the pawn, but I don't think that it's not as good as a development. Yes, I think Tarash's idea is the correct one. I think castle, maybe like knight d2 and castling queenside. That should be pretty solid for white. Yeah, I like that general idea. Obviously, definitely castle queenside over castling kingside. But I think f4 is a little bit inefficient. I think you're still in the position where you really want to develop. Yeah, you need to develop. So I think bishop b5. A developing manner of defending e5 is the best move. It develops and defends e5. That's why it's the best. f4 does not develop but defends e5, so it only does one of the two things that bishop to b5 does. Okay, f4, f6, and basically white is pretty much good here. I think queen h6. Overall, this this is good. I was expecting black to castle kingside, so now, the pawn storm on the kingside is a little bit less defined. But I want to pause here, because I think that this pawn structure is actually is going to hold pretty well for white. The weak points in this pawn structure, of which there are three, actually, e3, g3, and g2, they're all relatively weak. So basically, something like queen h4 could be good, like trading off the queen, but none of the vulnerable points in white's pawn structure are really very accessible. White will probably just want to improve pieces here. I think maybe knight b3, knight c5 could be good. Maybe queen h2, queen g1. I'm scrambling a little bit to find a good attacking plan for white. There should be one here, but I don't really know what it is. Let's think about that. Interesting. Knight e7, f5. Yeah, I like that play for black. That looks like a good way for black to continue this. Knight e7, knight f5. Yep, makes sense to me. White's going to need to find a better solution for his queen, I think. I was looking at ideas. There's a few different ways that white could improve his queen, but this queen is pretty useless over here now. You're not really going to win any pawns or anything, and the queen kind of needs to be in the game at this point. So I'm thinking like knight f6, queen g5 maybe. But yeah, that knight e7, knight f5 is deadly. That's going to be a really strong outpost for that knight. Makes me wonder if you can get like knight f4 or knight f3 or knight b3 and then knight d4, maybe. But yeah, that knight getting posted on f5 could really be a problem. Move knight and move. Interesting. I mean, maybe. Yeah, and then a threat on maybe. Maybe. It's interesting. I sort of want to hold on to this. This is the last game, so we have a little bit longer on this. We have, we don't have to rush through this one. I'm thinking hard about what what the plans are here for white. So here, knight f3, queen g5 seems to make sense. But in terms of a plan for black, I like this knight e7, knight f5 plan a lot. That post is just going to be so strong for that knight. So that's black's plan. But I think the queen needs, I think one of either two things. So either Aphelion, or who has it? This plan can g4 be used to stop their knight? Yes, potentially. Yeah, I mean, yes, g4 probably should be good. But then you have to worry about things like e6. So let's say like g4, e5, and then you have this bishop threat on that pawn. That could be tricky. Then you probably play f5 is the consistent move. So like in this case, let's say knight e7, g4, e5. How does this look for black? This is a threat on this g4 pawn. If the g4 pawn plays to g5, then the knight gets the f5 post. If f5 is played, this is kind of interesting. The pawn can't take because the queen is hanging, so maybe e4. But this does actually effectively, but that g4 idea, g4, f5, does effectively prevent the knight from coming to f5. That does seem to work. So maybe here e4, queen b6, something. It's pretty tricky. Maybe dr f8. Not sure exactly what to do here. But yeah, let's keep looking. This is so going. I'm going to play back to the position we were looking at. This is fine for white. It looks like it mangles the pawn structure, but it basically trades off the black's good squared bishop, and makes it black very unlikely to castle kingside, because castling kingside becomes really dangerous with like bishop d3 and queen h5. I think white's fine here. And then this is where the things really start to get complicated. Where does white advance here? Castling queenside is good. Knight b4 I think is an error for black. Yeah, so knight b4 is just inefficient. It's the type of move that you just sort of don't want to play as a general policy. It's basically like a one move threat that that white improves slightly by dealing with. Like black is black is basically better after a3. What does the eval say after 14 a6? Good question. It should be good for black. It looks like about even. But a6 is not considered to be the best move for black here. The best move for black here is e5, threatening to try to get, basically this pawn structure is weak, but it's not very exposed. So what the engine's trying to do is it's trying to play e5 and then break into this pawn structure, like basically create open lines on what is actually a vulnerable pawn structure. It's fine. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Amelia. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. But yeah, the computer is saying black needs active counterplay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, so yeah, like a more neutral move like a6, less aggressive, is going to end up with, about equality. e5 is the only move it looks like that improves beyond equality. So yeah, you're right, Charash. I mean, basically it's saying that the active move here, e5, is a necessary one in order to maintain black's initiative. That's true. So yeah, I think a6. I mean, a6 is a very intuitive move. It's just solid. No real issues getting created by it. My preferred move is knight e7. Knight e7 with threats of f5, and then e5 coming after that. That's what I like as black here. This is about, knight e7 leads to about equality. But the computer is implying that active counterplay e5 is the strongest, and that's probably right. Opening lines on these vulnerable pawns is probably a good idea. It's just interesting. But knight b4 is an error. So knight b4 is the move, is an error by black. It basically doesn't. No, and I think that's the right policy. I think these are the positions where you really want to come up with the opening's basically finished, so you're out of preparation. There's not any immediate tactics, because immediate tactics, are ideally you recognize, and those speed things up. This is really just kind of a broader strategic question. This is when you ask a broader strategic question, like what should white be doing here, and how does white efficiently improve his pieces? Part of me is like, all right, well, I mean both sides basically. How should either side progress? The answer for black is e5, which creates the most aggressive counterplay. The other side of it is, with white, with white's queen stuck on h6, do you continue to press with the queen on h6, or do you retreat the queen and have it be less displaced and more a part of the game, or do you try to trade it off for black's queen? Are all acceptable questions. Yeah. So that plan is definitely one that makes sense. I mean, basically, tactics on g6 and h7 sort of imply that the queen is staying on h6. If the queen is staying on h6, then I think you're pretty much good. But yeah, bishop d3, rook h2, rook h1, and white is in pretty good. White is in a pretty good place. That's sort of how I would play this, and or I mean, I don't know if that's how I would play this, but it's definitely a plan that makes sense. So that's Tarash's plan, is to basically keep the queen on h6 and start tactics with the knight and bishop on g6, if I'm understanding correctly. I like that. I think that's a valid plan. But knight b4 is an error. Knight b4, a3, knight c6. This is gonna be good for white. It's just basically a wasted tempo for black, and a3 slightly improves white's position. That was not the way that that shouldn't have happened. So a3, knight c6, and white is good. E4 I like better. Hey, thank you very much for the follow-up, Painy VL. Thank you very much for joining the stream. So I think e4 is probably the way to go. Yeah, here. I mean, it's black to move. So white has the opportunity to play responsively here, with a3, knight c6 basically being a forced combination, and then here I might play e4. But then black plays another forcing move, d4, and white can just play e4 or knight e4 and have a pretty good position. Yep. It's a plan for sure, Tarash. Is it the best plan? Maybe. I mean, maybe. Here I definitely would play e4, knight f3, bishop d3. Probably is a good plan. I'm wondering if there's any way to get the rooks in front of the queen too. Oh no problem, Julio. No, we went over it first in the stream. So as soon as this stream ends, you should be able to get it on Twitch. But thank you very much for sending the game, Julio, and yeah, please keep sending them. Your game was the bishop c4 game out of the Petrov. Yeah, no, of course, Julio. Please keep sending games. I'm super happy to help, and hope the analysis is helpful. I really appreciate you having you on the stream. So please keep sending games, and yeah, it's great. Really interesting games and awesome. Thanks. But it'll go up as soon as this stream is over. Yeah. So here e4 I think probably. And yeah, the more you're looking at this, or the more you're talking about this, Tarash, is the more sold on becoming on making this game about attacking on the king side. I think attacking on the king side sort of makes sense because you can get bishop to d3 and knight f3 in, and then really, your king side is under no stress. You can just sort of attack on the king side here and be fine. Maybe knight g5. I don't know. Overall, just white seems better, so good stuff. Black has no real strategy. D4 I think was an error, so let's go back a few moves. So I think black makes a few errors in a row. I think A3, knight B4 is an error to the advancing A3. I think this ends up giving white a tempo and improving white's position. King B1 I'm not a huge fan of. I think I would probably play something that more directly improves the pieces, like probably bishop to D3. I think that makes more sense as white. But king b1 gets played, and then I think black makes his second error, which is d4, and d4 allows white to play e4 and get a really solid pawn structure. This is no longer a weak pawn set. This all holds together very well. So here, maybe knight f3, bishop d3, and white's okay. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't have gone with pawn takes d4. I would just let the pawn be kind of isolated. I see that it's advanced, but it's advanced and somewhat vulnerable. You can play e4, knight f3, and white's position looks pretty good to me. Yeah. So the queen is blockading that h7 pawn. It is pretty displaced. If the action in the position is going on anywhere other than this king side. So say there was play going on or pieces oriented towards an attack on the queen side here, then the queen would be displaced on h6. But in this position where basically the queen is already on h6, it might just make sense to start building an attack on h7 and holding the queen on h6, and then it sort of like self-justifies. Like it ends up being like the queen was displaced, but then you moved all the pieces around it, so it's no longer out of the way. It's in the middle of the action. So that kind of makes sense. Yeah, the bishop's bad on d7. Knight to e7, knight to f3. Yeah, overall, I think white is winning and has better pieces and kind of a better way to formulate an attack. I mean, this holds together as an attack. Threats on h7, holding the rook file. That makes sense as a standalone attack. Black doesn't really have much going on here. The attack that black would intuitively be playing would be like, I don't know, maybe with all of white's pieces oriented towards the king side, black may do the best by trying to launch an attack with the queen side pawns, but he's way behind on that attack. It's going to take him a bunch of moves to set that up if that's his goal. I think black is just sort of forced to play reactively here, and that generally tends to be good for the player who is not playing reactively. Interesting position though. I feel like e4 is a pretty objective improvement on d4. Yeah, probably. That makes sense. Yep, good point. But I like e4. I feel like white's just good here. Black's getting suggested e5. Here I think I'd probably play just like knight f3 or bishop c4. But I don't know, knight f3 maybe. Because this pawn on f4 is not really very vulnerable. In fact, I'm sort of wondering if this, let's just say there's nothing that's forced about this position, but is this an effective way to attack on the king side too? Maybe not. No, maybe not. So I guess we can step back on that one. Yeah, bishop g4. Cool. e5. But bishop g4 might be getting played no matter what. I like bishop c4. I'm sold on bishop c4 over knight f3 now. Because here, on bishop to g4, you can play rook to f1 and have pressure on this file, which is going to become open. That's better. And this diagonal is good for white. This is a good big diagonal. So yeah, bishop g4, rook f1, whatever. And white's should be good. Heading into an endgame with a really a strong initiative at the very least. Probably an attack that wins material. So yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to the game. So instead of e4, which I think is a way better way for white to manage his center here, he plays pawn takes d4, which I don't think is the right move. Yeah. So let's go through pawn takes d4. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, it's an interesting game. This is the last one of this session, so I feel like I could probably slow down. Yeah, white's in a good place here. It is a really interesting game. It's interesting. The queen being displaced on h6 leads to a bunch of stuff. How do you handle the queen being on h6 and not being able to get out very easily? Like, do you keep attacking on h7 and then the queen on h6 is sort of more justified, or yeah. This is Leave Sayez's game. But yeah, I hope this is helpful. And then white is in a pretty good. Yes, right. That is true to Tarash. So it's kind of but it's interesting from a fundamental perspective. Like, it actually, I think your plan is right. I think, with the queen already on h6, it becomes worthwhile to start moving the other pieces to the rook file and like focusing on bishop takes g6, knight takes h7 type stuff, because it's already over there, and then there's not really anything going on anywhere else on the board, so it sort of makes sense. Interesting. And then black sort of walks into mate here, but overall super interesting game actually. So in terms of really specific errors, yeah, exactly. No, that is, I mean, that is true. I think probably queen h6 was never the right idea, though, right? I mean, the eval shifts pretty hard. Like, I forgot how the queen got to h6, but when you go back to the earlier part of this game, this is how it got to h6. g6 gets played, and then queen h6 gets played. And I don't think that was a good idea. I think maybe instead, like, queen to d1, and then, on queen takes b2, rook to b1, rook takes b7, maybe. So yeah, so I think this shouldn't have really happened. I don't think it should have been moved to h6, but so that's an improvement for white. Everything else sort of makes sense. Here I would play bishop to b5 over. So in terms of going through this game, just for takeaways, since we spent some good time on it, bishop to b5 is a developing move that defends e5. That's an improvement on f4, which is just a move that prevents, defends e5. Bishop b5 does both. It both develops and holds e5. So that's good. F6. Yeah, so I think queen h6 is an inaccuracy. Here I'd play knight c3. Knight c3, I guess potentially runs into e5, but it's a developing move that defends b2, so I think that has value. This is better than just letting the b2 pawn hang. Queen takes b2 isn't fantastic. It has a lot of drawbacks, but it does win material, so you probably do want to prevent it, all things equal. Knight to c3. Queen h5, queen h6, and I think queen h6 was an error. Getting your queen locked over here didn't have a very clear purpose. I think if you go to like, you go to like queen d1, or you go to like queen e2, I think these are better alternatives that leave the queen more solidly in the game. Queen h6 is very aggressive looking. And it could potentially be useful, if your opponent castles, then queen takes h7 mate. But realistically, it's probably better to just keep your queen more generally accessible in the center of the board. Queenside castle looks great. I like that move. Knight b4 I think is an error for black. a3 I like that move. It capitalizes on black's error and gains a tempo and moves a3, which I think improves your position overall. King b1 is kind of not, it doesn't really help that much, to be honest. You don't really need to play it. I know it's dangerous, and I know, like, on b3, the queen can go to a1 and cause a lot of trouble, but I think king b1 is a little bit unnecessary. Probably just improving the pieces is a good idea, like knight b3, bishop d3, something like that. Um, Here, definitely e4 over pawn takes d4. I think pawn takes d4 basically. This is. I think this is a good center. I think having e4, f4 here controls a lot of space in the center that would be helpful to black. So I would keep this on board. It's not that I'm saying avoid trading on d4. I don't know how relevant that is. Yeah, no, of course, Tarash. No, I really think it's helpful, and especially you sharing your tactical training regimen. I wish you could get. I mean, I think a lot of people would really benefit from adopting Tarash's tactics training. I wish more people did that. So, sharing how much tactics you're studying, Tarash, I think is always helpful in kind of moving that general concept forward. Yeah, but I think it's a great idea. I think everyone in the stream, including myself, would benefit from doing tactics so much and so consistently. So I like that you bring it up because it gives kind of a good frame of reference of what a good tactical training regimen looks like. But yeah, so e4 over d4 here. Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's great. Yeah, and if you share a game, either send me a game on Discord or here, and I'll put it on the schedule. So yeah, so I think e4 was better than takes d4 than pawn takes d4 there. This opening or this center control is good for white, and yeah, cool. And then I think white wins this game pretty efficiently in the end game. So good stuff. But yeah, those are the pieces that I would look at. I think bishop b5 is a more efficient way to defend e5 in that early middle game position. I think moving the queen to h6 leaves it displaced. I think moving the queen back to e2 is probably better, or d1 is better. And then I would secure the solid center with e4 over pawn takes d4 there. Those are the three pieces in this game that I would look at, Leave, and I hope that's helpful. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for sending the game, Tarash. The game is in for May 10th at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Cool. Yeah, no, awesome. And I'll remember it's Queen, it's Indian. I might pair that with some other stuff. But yeah, thank you very much all for being here. Thank you very much for participating so much in the stream. I really appreciate it. It's super helpful when people tell me where they're thinking about, or like what they're thinking about in terms of their analysis. I can focus on their analysis. So appreciate Zipcag for doing that and giving me a way to focus on particular parts of the game. But yeah, thanks all for being here. My next stream is at 6:05 p.m. Eastern tonight. And I really appreciate really appreciate all the participation and for sending the games out. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thank you for being here. Next stream is at 6:05 tonight. Have a good day, everyone. I'll see you later. Bye.